Marcus Ashford stood before the full-length mirror in his penthouse, barely recognizing the reflection staring back at him. The tailored suits and polished shoes had been replaced with tattered clothing picked up from a thrift store. His usually groomed salt-and-pepper hair was now disheveled, and he'd applied theatrical makeup to add shadows and lines to his face. At 62, Marcus had built a restaurant empire spanning 3 continents, with over 200 establishments bearing his name. Yet standing here, transformed into a homeless beggar, he looked nothing like the man whose face graced the covers of business magazines. This experiment had been brewing in his mind for months, ever since his granddaughter Emma asked him a simple question. "Grandpa, do you think people would still be nice to you if you weren't rich?" The question haunted him. Marcus had grown up poor in Detroit, sleeping in his family's station wagon during the coldest winters. He remembered the sting of rejection, the way people's eyes would slide past him as if he were invisible. Now, decades later and billions richer, he was treated like royalty wherever he went. But was it respect for him as a person, or merely deference to his wealth? He decided to test his own establishments, to see how his employees treated those who couldn't offer anything in return. Marcus had built his business on a philosophy of dignity and kindness, values hammered into every training manual and staff meeting. But words were cheap. He needed to know if these principles survived when the corporate offices weren't watching, when there were no cameras or inspections, just ordinary moments of human interaction. His target was the Riverside Bistro, a mid-sized restaurant in Seattle that he'd acquired 5 years ago. It wasn't his flagship location, but it was successful and well-reviewed. Marcus had studied the staff profiles. There was Sarah Chin, the evening shift manager who'd been with the company for 3 years. 2 line cooks, both veterans of the industry, and several waitstaff, including a young woman named Jessica Martinez who'd only been employed for 6 months. As Marcus prepared to leave his hotel room, he felt a tremor of nervousness. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was personal. He was about to confront the gap between the man he believed himself to be and the man poverty had once forced him to become. Would he see himself in the eyes of his employees, or would he see the invisible ghost he once was? Taking a deep breath, Marcus grabbed a worn backpack containing nothing of value and headed out into the rainy Seattle evening, ready to discover what his legacy truly meant. The rain fell in sheets as Marcus approached the Riverside Bistro, its warm lights glowing invitingly through the downpour. His clothes were already soaked, clinging uncomfortably to his skin. He'd been walking the streets for 2 hours, getting into character, observing how people reacted to his appearance. The results were depressingly predictable. Pedestrians gave him wide berth. A woman clutched her purse tighter as he passed. A security guard had warned him away from a storefront where he'd briefly sought shelter from the rain. Now, standing outside his own restaurant, Marcus felt the full weight of his disguise. Through the window, he could see well-dressed diners enjoying their meals, laughing and talking without a care. The contrast between their world and his current appearance felt like a chasm. He shuffled toward the entrance, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for the door handle. Before he could grasp it, the door swung open, and a couple emerged, recoiling slightly at the sight of him. "Excuse me," Marcus mumbled, his voice hoarse from deliberately straining it. "I don't mean to bother you folks, but I'm awful hungry. I haven't eaten in 2 days. Could you spare some change?" The man's face hardened. "Get a job," he muttered, pulling his date closer as they hurried past. The woman didn't even make eye contact. Marcus felt the old familiar shame wash over him, a ghost from his past that his billions had never quite exorcised. He remembered being that desperate person, remembered the grinding humiliation of begging, and suddenly this experiment felt far too real. He entered the restaurant, immediately feeling out of place among the polished wood and elegant lighting. The host's station was empty momentarily, so he stood there dripping rainwater onto the hardwood floors. A young hostess appeared, her professional smile faltering when she saw him. Marcus watched the subtle shift in her expression, the slight step backward, the way her hand moved protectively toward the phone. "Sir, I'm sorry, but—" she began, her voice wavering between politeness and concern. I know I don't look like much, Marcus interrupted, keeping his voice gentle but tired. I'm not here to cause trouble. I was just hoping maybe someone had leftover food, something that would just be thrown away anyway. I haven't eaten since yesterday morning, and I'm feeling pretty weak. The hostess's name tag read Amanda. She looked uncertain, glancing toward the dining room as if seeking guidance. Marcus could see the conflict playing across her young face. She was probably 22 or 23, likely working this job to pay for college. He'd trained his managers to handle situations like this with compassion, but he'd never witnessed it from this perspective. Let me get the manager, Amanda finally said, and Marcus's heart sank slightly. This was it, the moment of truth, though not the one he'd expected first. Sarah Chin emerged from the kitchen with the purposeful stride of someone accustomed to handling difficult situations. At 34, she'd worked her way up through the restaurant industry, and Marcus's research had shown she was efficient, professional, and generally well-liked by her staff. Now, approaching him with a neutral expression, she embodied every gatekeeper he'd need to get past. "Good evening, sir," Sarah said, her tone polite but firm. "Amanda mentioned you were looking for food?" Marcus nodded, hunching his shoulders to appear more defeated. "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry to be a bother. I know this is a nice place and I don't fit in. But I'm awful hungry and I thought maybe, well, I know restaurants throw away food at the end of the night sometimes. I wasn't asking for anything fresh or anything that would cost you. Just something that would otherwise go to waste." Sarah studied him for a long moment, and Marcus found himself genuinely unable to read her expression. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals, read boardrooms full of executives, but in this moment, wearing these clothes, he felt powerless. The dynamic was completely reversed. She held all the cards. "Our policy is that we don't serve people who aren't customers," Sarah said slowly, and Marcus felt his stomach drop. But then she continued, "However, you're right that we do have food waste. Are you allergic to anything?" The question caught Marcus off guard.
"No, ma'am."
"I can eat anything." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Wait here just a moment. And please step inside fully. You're getting soaked." She gestured to a small waiting area by the entrance, away from the main dining room. Marcus complied, noticing how she'd managed his presence with discretion, neither humiliating him nor allowing him to disrupt her paying customers. As Sarah disappeared into the back, Marcus observed the restaurant operations with his trained eye. The service was smooth, tables were turning at a good pace, and the atmosphere was warm without being pretentious. This location was profitable, he knew, pulling in about $40,000 a week. Sarah ran a tight ship, and he'd been considering promoting her to regional manager. But credentials and profit margins were one thing. Character was another. Amanda, the hostess, kept glancing his way nervously. Marcus offered her a small, non-threatening smile, and after a moment, she smiled back tentatively. "It's a cold night to be out," she said quietly. "It is," Marcus agreed. "Every night's cold when you don't have walls around you." A few minutes later, Sarah returned carrying not leftovers, but what appeared to be a freshly prepared plate. A chicken breast with roasted vegetables, a side of mashed potatoes, and 2 warm rolls. Marcus stared at it in genuine surprise. "This isn't," he began. "It's what we're serving tonight," Sarah said simply. "I can't let you eat in the dining room. I hope you understand. But there's a covered area out back where you'll be dry. It's where staff take their breaks." Marcus followed Sarah through a side door to the covered patio area she'd mentioned. It was simple but clean, with a few picnic tables and overhead heating lamps that fought off the evening chill. The rain drummed steadily on the metal roof, creating a cocoon of sound that separated this space from the world. Sarah set the plate down on one of the tables. "Take your time," she said. "When you're finished, just leave the plate. Someone will collect it." She turned to leave, then paused. "There's a shelter about 6 blocks north of here, on Pine Street. They do good work if you need a place tonight." "Thank you," Marcus said, his voice thick with genuine emotion. "You didn't have to do this." Sarah met his eyes directly. "Yes, I did," she said simply, then headed back inside. Alone with his meal, Marcus felt tears prickling at his eyes. He'd expected his own policies to be followed, but there was a difference between following rules and showing genuine compassion. Sarah had gone beyond policy, preparing fresh food rather than scraping together leftovers. As he ate, the food tasted better than meals he'd had in Michelin-starred restaurants, seasoned with the rare spice of unexpected kindness. He was halfway through the meal when the door opened again. A young woman emerged, wearing a server's uniform and carrying a steaming cup. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and warm brown eyes that reminded Marcus of his late wife. Her name tag read Jessica. "Hi," she said, approaching with an easy smile that showed no trace of discomfort or condescension. "Sarah mentioned you were out here. I thought you might like some coffee. It's fresh and it's getting cold out." Marcus accepted the cup gratefully.
"Thank you, miss."
"You're very kind." Jessica sat down across from him, and Marcus was startled by her casualness. "Mind if I join you for a minute? It's crazy busy in there, and I could use a breather." "Of course," Marcus said, genuinely curious about this young woman who seemed so at ease. "I'm Jessica," she said. "What's your name?" "Marcus," he replied without thinking, then worried he'd blown his cover. But Jessica just nodded. "Nice to meet you, Marcus. How long have you been on the streets?" The directness of the question, asked without judgment, threw him off balance. "A while," he said vaguely. "You lose track of time." Jessica nodded thoughtfully. "My uncle was homeless for 3 years. Addiction issues. He's doing better now, but those were hard years for our family. I remember visiting him at shelters, how defeated he looked, but also how grateful he was for small kindnesses." Marcus studied Jessica as she spoke about her uncle, noting the absence of pity or superiority in her voice. She talked about homelessness the way someone might discuss any difficult life circumstance, with empathy, but without the performative sympathy that often made such conversations uncomfortable. This young woman, who couldn't have been more than 25, possessed an emotional intelligence that many of his executives lacked. "What brought you to Seattle?" Jessica asked, sipping from her own coffee cup. Marcus had prepared a backstory, but sitting across from this genuine person, he found himself drawing on real memories. "I used to work in restaurants, actually. Long time ago. Things just fell apart. Lost my job, then my apartment. Once you're down, it's hard to get back up." "What did you do in restaurants?" Jessica's interest seemed authentic. "Cooking, managing, bit of everything. I loved it, the energy of it, the way a good meal could change someone's whole day." That much was absolutely true. Even now, with all his wealth, Marcus's fondest memories were of working the line in his first restaurant, that original location in Detroit that had started everything. Jessica's eyes lit up. "That's exactly how I feel about it. I mean, I'm just waiting tables right now, but I'm in culinary school. This job helps pay tuition. Some people think it's silly, dedicating so much time to learning to cook, but food is important, you know? It's not just fuel. It's culture, memory, comfort." Marcus found himself genuinely smiling for the first time that evening. It's not silly at all. The best chefs I ever knew understood that they weren't just making food. They were creating experiences, memories, moments of joy in people's lives. "Exactly." Jessica leaned forward enthusiastically. "My instructor says the same thing. Where did you work before?" Marcus carefully navigated the question. "Small places mostly. Nothing fancy. But I learned from people who really cared about their craft." They talked for another 20 minutes discussing cooking techniques, restaurant culture, the challenges of the industry. Jessica asked about his current situation with a delicacy that showed both concern and respect for his dignity. When he mentioned sleeping rough, she didn't recoil or offer empty platitudes. Instead, she pulled out her phone. "Listen, I volunteer at that shelter Sarah mentioned, the one on Pine Street. I actually have a shift there tomorrow morning. If you go tonight, ask for a guy named Ray. Tell him Jessica sent you. He'll make sure you get a bed and maybe some clean clothes." Marcus was touched by the specificity of her help. This wasn't just pointing him toward generic resources. She was using her personal connections to ensure he'd be taken care of. "That's very kind of you. Also," Jessica continued, pulling a $20 bill from her pocket, "take this. I know it's not much, but… No, Marcus interrupted gently. No, you've already given me more than enough. Keep your money. Jessica looked at him seriously. Marcus, I make decent tips. $20 isn't going to break me, and it might make a real difference for you. The sincerity in her voice moved Marcus deeply. This young woman, working her way through school, juggling jobs and volunteering, was trying to give him money she'd earned through hard work. He knew from her employee file that she made about $35,000 a year between the restaurant and her other part-time job. $20 represented something to her. How about a compromise? Marcus suggested. You've given me a hot meal, coffee, and good conversation. That's worth more than money to me right now. But if you really want to help, maybe you could tell me if they're hiring? I haven't worked in a while, but I'm not afraid of hard work. Dishwashing, cleaning, anything. Jessica's face brightened. Actually, I think we are. One of our dishwashers just put in his notice. I can't promise anything, but I could talk to Sarah. She does the hiring for back-of-house positions. I don't want to put you in an awkward position, Marcus said, though he was intensely curious about how this would play out. You're not. Sarah's great about giving people chances. She hired someone last year who'd been in prison. Some managers won't even consider it, but Sarah said everyone deserves a second chance. Jessica stood up, collecting the empty plate. Finish your coffee. I'm going to talk to her right now. Before Marcus could protest, Jessica had disappeared back into the restaurant. He sat alone with his thoughts, marveling at the evening's developments. He'd come expecting to observe from the margins, perhaps catch employees in moments of cruelty or indifference. Instead, he'd encountered competence, compassion, and genuine kindness. Sarah had fed him with dignity. Jessica had treated him like a human being, sharing conversation and offering concrete help. But a cynical part of his mind wondered, would this kindness extend to actual employment? It was one thing to give someone a meal or direct them to a shelter. It was another to trust them with a job, to vouch for them, to stake your professional reputation on a homeless person's reliability. The door opened again, and Sarah emerged with Jessica. The manager's expression was thoughtful as she approached Marcus's table. Jessica tells me you have restaurant experience, Sarah began, without preamble. What kind of work did you do? Marcus recounted his fabricated history, keeping it vague but plausible. Sarah listened intently, asking pointed questions about specific procedures and equipment. Marcus answered carefully, drawing on his extensive industry knowledge while avoiding anything too sophisticated that might raise suspicion. Our dishwasher gave 2 weeks' notice, Sarah said finally. The job pays $15 an hour and you'd work nights, Tuesday through Saturday. It's hard work, hot and physical. We need someone reliable who can show up on time and handle the pressure during rush periods. Marcus met her eyes. I understand. Ma'am, I'll be honest with you. I'm homeless, as you can see. I can't promise I look presentable, but I can promise I'll show up, work hard, and not cause problems. Sarah crossed her arms, considering. Marcus could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. She was weighing risks and benefits, balancing her compassion against practical business concerns. He knew this position well, had stood in it himself countless times when evaluating business decisions. But now, sitting on the other side of that assessment, he felt vulnerable in a way no boardroom negotiation had ever made him feel. Here's what I can offer, Sarah said slowly. Come in tomorrow at 2. We'll do a working interview, meaning you'll spend a few hours in the dish pit, and we'll see how it goes. If it works out, I can start you the day after. But Marcus, I need to be clear about expectations. Of course, he replied. You'd need to be clean. We have a shower in the staff area you can use before shifts. Uniforms are provided, but you're responsible for keeping them clean. We have a laundry service, so that's manageable. You can't come to work intoxicated or high. I don't care what you do on your own time, but during work hours, you need to be sober and focused. Marcus nodded. These were reasonable requirements standard in the industry, but hearing them addressed to him as a homeless person gave them different weight. Sarah wasn't just reciting policy. She was establishing boundaries that acknowledged his situation while demanding accountability. I don't drink or use drugs, Marcus said truthfully. And I'll be clean and ready to work. Good. One more thing. Sarah's expression softened slightly. I believe in second chances, but I can't let personal situations disrupt the business. If you can't make a shift, you need to call at least 4 hours in advance. If you no call no show, you're done. No exceptions. I'll work with you on scheduling around shelter hours or other obligations, but you have to communicate with me.
Can you do that?
Yes, ma'am. I can and I will. Sarah extended her hand. Then I'll see you tomorrow at 2. Ask for me specifically when you arrive. Marcus shook her hand, feeling the firm grip of someone who meant what she said. As Sarah headed back inside, Jessica lingered for a moment. You've got this, she said encouragingly. Sarah wouldn't have offered the working interview if she didn't think you could do it. She's tough but fair.
Thank you, Marcus said.
For putting in a good word for me. Jessica smiled. I didn't have to put in much of a word. I just told her you seemed capable and willing to work. The rest was you. She checked her watch. I need to get back to my tables. But seriously, go to that shelter tonight. Get some rest. And good luck tomorrow. After Jessica disappeared inside, Marcus sat for a few more minutes, processing the evening. His experiment had taken an unexpected turn. He'd come to observe. Instead, he'd been offered a job. Now he faced a decision. He could reveal himself tomorrow, thank everyone for confirming that his values had taken root in his organization, and go back to his regular life. But something held him back. What he'd experienced tonight was just the beginning, the easy part. Sarah and Jessica had shown kindness to a stranger, but how would they treat him as an employee? Marcus arrived at the Riverside Bistro the next day at exactly 2 o'clock, having spent the previous night at the Pine Street shelter as Jessica had suggested. Ray, the shelter coordinator, had indeed taken care of him after hearing Jessica's name, providing a bed, a shower, and clean clothes. Marcus had lain awake most of the night, his back aching from the thin mattress, listening to the sounds of dozens of people struggling with their own demons. It was a humbling reminder of how far he'd come and how quickly circumstances could change. He'd dressed in the cleanest clothes from his homeless disguise, though they were still obviously worn and mismatched. As he entered through the back door as instructed, Marcus felt genuinely nervous. He'd started his first restaurant with confidence born of youth and naivety. Now, at 62, about to work a dish pit for the first time in 40 years, he felt oddly uncertain. Sarah met him at the staff entrance, her expression neutral, but not unkind. Right on time. That's good. Come with me. She led him through the kitchen, and Marcus took in every detail with his trained eye. The organization was good, cleanliness standards high, and the staff moved with efficient coordination. Sarah introduced him to Raphael, the head chef, a stocky man in his 50s with forearms like tree trunks and a stern expression. This is Marcus. He's doing a working interview for the dish position, Sarah explained. Raphael sized Marcus up with a single sweeping glance. You worked kitchens before? Yes, sir. Long time ago. Then you know the dish pit is the heart of the kitchen. You fall behind. Everybody falls behind. You keep us stocked with clean plates, pans, and utensils. We can do our jobs. You don't. Service collapses. Understood. Understood. Raphael nodded to a young man standing by the industrial dishwasher. Tommy will show you the system. He's leaving in 2 weeks, so pay attention. Tommy was 19, with tattoos creeping up his neck and a surprisingly warm smile. Don't let Raphael intimidate you. His bark's worse than his bite. Come on, I'll show you the setup. The dish pit was exactly as Marcus remembered from his early days. Hot, humid, and demanding. Tommy walked him through the system with practiced ease. Dirty dishes came in from the dining room and got scraped and sorted. Everything went through the industrial washer, which ran on a 90-second cycle. Hot, clean dishes came out the other side and needed to be immediately distributed to their proper stations before the next load came through. The trick is rhythm, Tommy explained. You get into a flow, and the time passes faster. Fight it, try to rush, and you'll just get buried. During dinner rush, this pit becomes a war zone. But if you keep your cool and maintain steady pace, you'll make it through. Marcus nodded, rolling up his sleeves. Let's do this. The first hour was manageable. The restaurant was between lunch and dinner service, so dishes trickled in at a reasonable pace. Marcus fell into the work, his body remembering rhythms from decades ago. His hands worked steadily, scraping, rinsing, loading, unloading, stacking. The heat was intense, steam rising from the washer in thick clouds. Within 30 minutes, he was drenched in sweat. Tommy supervised quietly, occasionally offering tips or corrections, but mostly letting Marcus find his own way. At one point, Raphael came by, observing silently for several minutes before grunting what might have been approval and returning to his station. Jessica appeared during her break, bringing Marcus a bottle of cold water. "How's it going?" "Hot," Marcus admitted, accepting the water gratefully. "But manageable. Wait till dinner rush starts at 5:30. That's when things get real." She smiled encouragingly. "But Tommy told Sarah you're doing fine. That's a good sign." As 5 o'clock approached, Marcus could feel the energy in the kitchen shift. The cooks moved faster, their banter becoming more focused and efficient. More servers appeared, tying aprons and reviewing specials. Sarah emerged from the office, surveying her domain with the eye of a general preparing for battle. "Dinner service," Raphael called out, and the transformation was immediate. The trickle of dishes became a flood. The servers moved in a constant stream, depositing bus tubs full of dirty plates, glasses, and silverware. The noise level rose dramatically, clattering dishes, shouted orders, the constant hiss of the dishwasher, the clang of pots and pans. Marcus worked as fast as he could, but within 15 minutes he was falling behind. "Don't panic," Tommy said, stepping in to help. "Just keep moving, one load at a time." But the dishes kept coming, piling up faster than Marcus could process them. His back ached from bending over the sink. His hands, soft from years of executive life, began to blister from the heat and harsh chemicals. Sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes. At one point, he dropped a stack of plates, and they shattered across the floor. "Keep going," Tommy shouted over the noise. "I'll get the broom." Marcus's pride, that billionaire's ego that had carried him through countless business battles, wanted to quit. This was beneath him. He was Marcus Ashford, not some dishwasher struggling to keep pace. But another part of him, the part that remembered sleeping in his family's car, that remembered what it meant to have no choices, kept his hands moving. Raphael appeared at his elbow. "You're in the weeds, but you're not drowning. That's what matters. First dinner rush is always hardest. Keep pushing." The chef's words, gruff but not unkind, gave Marcus a second wind. He adjusted his approach, focusing on rhythm rather than speed, just as Tommy had advised. Slowly, painfully, he began to catch up. By 8 o'clock, the dinner rush had subsided to a manageable flow. Marcus's entire body ached. His hands were raw, his back screamed with every movement, and he was pretty sure he'd developed a blister on his right heel. But the dish pit was clean, caught up, and running smoothly. Tommy clapped him on the shoulder. "You made it through. Not pretty, but you survived. That's more than some people manage their first night." Sarah appeared a few minutes later as Marcus was finishing his last load. She surveyed the area with her critical manager's eye, checking the cleanliness, the organization, and the stock of clean dishes ready for the next service. "Raphael says you had a rough patch but pushed through it," she said. "That's what I need to know about someone. Not whether they're perfect, but whether they quit when things get hard." "I don't quit," Marcus said, and he meant it on levels she couldn't possibly understand. Sarah nodded. "The job's yours if you want it. 15 an hour, Tuesday through Saturday, 4 to midnight. You'll work with Tommy for the next 2 weeks while he trains you on all our procedures. After that, you're on your own. Can you start tomorrow?" Marcus found himself genuinely considering it. He'd planned to reveal himself, to end the experiment. But something had changed during that brutal dinner rush. Working alongside these people, struggling with real physical labor, being judged solely on his effort and attitude rather than his bank account, It had awakened something in him he thought he'd lost decades ago. "Yes," he heard himself say. "I'll be here." After he'd changed out of his sweat-soaked clothes and prepared to leave, Jessica caught him at the back door.
Hey.
"I heard you got the job. Congratulations." "Thanks to you," Marcus said sincerely. "No, that was all you. I just made an introduction. You're the one who showed up and did the work." She hesitated, then pulled out a business card. "This is my friend Maria. She works at a program that helps people transition off the streets. They can help with permanent housing, job training, benefits applications, all that stuff. Just mention my name." Marcus took the card, overwhelmed by this young woman's persistent kindness. Over the years, he'd donated millions to charitable causes, written checks to homeless services and food banks. But Jessica, making a fraction of what he spent on a single business lunch, was giving something more valuable than money. She was giving her time, her personal connections, her genuine care. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. "You don't know me. I could be anyone." Jessica met his eyes with that same warm, direct gaze he'd come to recognize. "Because someone did it for my uncle when he needed it. Because we're all one or two bad breaks away from where you are. Because kindness isn't something you ration, it's something you practice." She smiled. "Besides, you seem like a good person who's had some bad luck. That's not a crime." As Marcus walked back toward the shelter that night, his body exhausted but his mind racing, he thought about his granddaughter's question. Would people still be nice to him if he weren't rich? The answer, he now knew, was more complicated than yes or no. Some people, like Sarah and Jessica, would be. They'd be kind not because of what they might gain, but because of who they were. He'd discovered something more valuable than any business insight, that the values he'd tried to build into his company had taken root in ways he couldn't have planned or mandated. Sarah Chun and Jessica Martinez weren't being kind because corporate policy required it. They were being kind because kindness had become part of the culture he'd fostered. Marcus Ashford had billions of dollars, hundreds of restaurants, and all the power that wealth could buy. But tonight, dishwashing for $15 an hour, he'd found something he didn't know he'd lost: perspective, humility, and faith in the human capacity for compassion. Tomorrow he would return, not as a billionaire conducting an experiment, but as Marcus the dishwasher, ready to earn his place one clean plate at a time. The revelation could wait. The lesson was still unfolding.